OXFIT.RADIO, fit as an ox, fit at any age. Hello, I'm your host, Westcott. I'll be exploring the positive impact of exercise and healthy living on helping both young and old achieve a long and active life. Did you know that aging can be slowed down and even reversed with exercise? And many health ailments can also be reduced or even prevented as well. Come join me as we explore these topics and more with leading experts in the field of exercise, wellness, and nutrition. Please remember to always consult your personal physician before beginning any exercise or nutritional program. In our first episode, we'll be exploring the science of strength training with Professor Wayne Westcott. Some of the topics we'll be covering include the many health benefits of strength training, including stopping and reversing muscle loss and improving bone density. We'll explore the role that strength training has in helping with and maintaining weight loss. And we'll discuss how strength training can actually reverse the effects of aging. Joining us today is Dr. Wayne Westcott. Dr. Westcott is Professor of Exercise Science and Personal Training at Quincy College in Quincy, Massachusetts. Dr. Westcott is author of numerous books, including Strength Training Past 50, and over 300 articles on the subject in professional journals, including the American College of Sports Medicine. He is a recipient of multiple awards for his research and work, including the Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Association of Fitness Professionals and the Healthy American Fitness Leader Award from the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports. Dr. Westcott serves as advisor to multiple national fitness organizations, including the American Council on Exercise, the American Senior Fitness Association, as well as advisor to the U.S. Army, Air Force, and Navy. Welcome, Dr. Westcott. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, Rashid. Happy to be with you.
Wayne, before we start talking about exercise, can you tell us a little bit about your own personal experience and how you started in a career on exercise research?
Sure. I was on the track team at Penn State University, and one day my coach said, "Do you really want to be an engineer?" I was enrolled in the College of Engineering, and I said, "I don't know. I'm only 18. I'm not sure." He said, "I think you'd be a good physical education teacher and coach. Would you consider changing your major?" And so I said, "Okay, that sounds fine."
Oh, that's
So I did. Interestingly, although he was no longer the coach at the time, a few years later, I actually became the assistant track and field coach at Penn State University. So it kind of went full circle. I'm glad he suggested that I do that.
That's interesting. Well, you certainly have a passion for it. Do you? When you were younger, were you in track and field, and that's how you got recognized?
Yes, I
go into that.
I did two things. I was a runner. I could run. That was simple. And I could lift weights. That was pretty easy. I didn't have a lot of eye-hand coordination for the popular sports like baseball or basketball or football, things of that nature, but I could run and lift weights. And so that's what I really like doing. I like fitness. And those are kind of two fitness activities, one more cardiovascular oriented, one more musculoskeletal oriented, but I've always enjoyed doing that. And so this I think became a really good career for me. At least it seems to match what I like to do.
I've met you, and you're in really good physical shape, which I can.
As are you. Thank you.
No, you're much better than me. I can attest to that. So, but with your teaching schedule and all the work that you do and research, which I know your schedule is really, really busy, but you still fit in exercise. And I know you have facilities that are close to you, but other people also have facilities that are close to them. But your schedule is so demanding. How do you make exercise fit into your life?
I go overboard on this, I'm sure. I really schedule it into my weekly programming, and I take, instead of taking vacations, I take a half day off every Wednesday so I can work out pretty hard on Wednesdays. And then I do come into the college on Saturday, but I use part of that time to work out. So I work out hard on Wednesdays and Saturdays, twice a week hard for my strength training. And usually I get 3 good endurance sessions a week on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and then on Sundays. The other days I dedicate to what I'm supposed to be doing academically, and just go for a walk with my wife, or with the dog and my wife on those days. At my age, I can get about 3 good workouts a week, and the other days have to be recovery days. But that's how I try to actually build into my schedule, and I get all approved by my superiors here at the college that's how it has to be in order for me to stay fit enough to do this job.
Right. Just for our listeners, you're almost 70, correct?
I'm over 70, but thank you for thinking I'm younger.
Well, I thought you were 60.
Oh, goodness, thank you.
Wayne, your research is primarily in resistance exercise, or what's also known as strength training, and for lay people, maybe just weightlifting. And most people think of weightlifting as bodybuilders, something like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But your research really shows that resistance training is for everybody. Can you elaborate on that, and why is that so?
Absolutely, and you do such a great job writing up the reasons for this. I appreciate the great job you do in communicating this to people as well.
Well, thank you.
People like Arnold and other Mr. Olympias, they probably are the least needy for resistance exercise because they have great genetics. They're very muscular. They're born as mesomorphs, have a larger than average number of muscle cells to start with. And when they do strength training, they really hypertrophy, become extremely muscular. Mm-hmm. But all of us need muscle. Muscles are the engines of the body. They're the chassis of the body. They pretty much enable us to be human beings instead of trees or plants, to move and to do all the things that we do functionally in life, physically functioning in life. And most of us don't have those great genetics. We need to supplement the gifts that we have with exercise, and the exercise for building muscle and bone and increasing our metabolic rate to reduce the risk of fat gain that affects so many people, as you know, would be resistance exercise. And that is the type of exercise that will help us to maximize our potential for a strong musculoskeletal system. And most people do not realize that until it's very late in life. Mm-hmm. And it's never too late to start strength training, as I know you're well aware, but it certainly helps to start a little earlier in life to maintain, to build and then maintain the bone and muscle.
Right. There's, excuse me, there's really no age limit, right, to start strength training. Hasn't your research shown that people in their 90s can also gain muscle?
Absolutely. We've done some nursing home studies with people who were non-ambulatory. They were mostly in wheelchairs, and all but one was out of the wheelchair at the end of the study, and she happened to be a double amputee, so she really wouldn't be able to get out of a wheelchair. But we've had wonderful success. And interestingly, Rashid, in one of our very large studies with about 2,000 participants, we found that people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, all, when they began a strength training workout, a strength training regimen in 10 weeks, they all increased their muscle mass by statistically the same amount. So age is not a barrier in terms of increasing strength or muscle. Now, you're not going to be as muscular at age 70 as you were at age 20. You're not going to be as strong. But if you haven't been doing this exercise, it's never too late to start. You will regain the muscle at a fairly rapid rate at an older age because you're so far from your genetic potential. It's very encouraging. However, it's better to do it younger and to maintain it.
Right. That's really good news for people listening, because it's something that people are often thinking that it's too late in life and they're not going to get any benefit from it. but your research is really useful to encourage people to exercise. And it's interesting that so many people think that strength training is something that they can't do. And it's such a misunderstanding and a lost opportunity for people. So I think the more people are aware of this, the better. And that's one thing that I've learned from my own experience in my life is the impact of weightlifting, and I should say weight training, because there's a difference between just lifting weights randomly and actually training. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of training and why that is different than just random exercise?
Absolutely. The words you said just a few minutes ago ring very clearly, that you can do strength training at any age, because strength training is, number one, very systematic, more systematic than pretty much anything else you can do, which we'll discuss in a moment. But secondly, strength training can be done with any amount of resistance, unlike most aerobic exercise where you're using your body weight. And if you're out of shape or overweight, that can be very challenging, even just for walking, let alone jogging or running. But with weights, you can take the resistance down, it's an external resistance, to whatever you can do a certain number of repetitions. And this gets to the system. The system that is recommended by most of our national organizations, including the American College of Sports Medicine, one of our largest national governing bodies, would be to choose about 10 exercises that cumulatively work all of your major muscle groups, like your chest and your back and your thighs, etc. And then use a resistance, whatever that is, that you can do about 8 to 12 times. And our research shows that most people with most exercises can do 8 repetitions, 8 times in succession, with about 80% of their maximum. Not their maximum, but 80%. And they can do 12 repetitions with about 70% of their maximum. We've done research on this. And so you're working in that 70 to 80% range, that moderate range, not too much, not too little. We almost never have injuries in our program when they use a progressive system that simply says, when you can do 12 reps, when you're now at 70% of your maximum, that's a signal that you can increase the resistance. You can raise the resistance a little bit, and then it'll cut your reps back maybe to 10 or 11 or 9, but then you stay at that weight, and so you can again do 12. And so you have this double progression that is extremely safe and extremely systematic, and it's always encouraging. You're almost always either going up in repetitions or adding a little weight until you reach, close to your genetic potential. Then you plateau and we do other things at that point. But strength training is a very systematic program that enables you to progress gradually, and in a reinforcing manner. You can write it down. You can see what you're doing.
Right.
It's very systematic.
And the difference between what you're talking about in that range of 70 to 80% of what you can lift is quite different than light weights. So a lot of older people are encouraged just to do light weights, and that's really not going to help you build muscle, right?
I agree with you, Rishi. There's some new research that shows that we can use lighter weights than we thought we could. But generally speaking, if there is one principle, and I'll explain this, it is to fatigue the target muscles. Let's say I'm doing biceps curls for my biceps muscles, to fatigue the biceps within what we call the anaerobic energy system. That's the system that we use for short-term, high-effort exercise, and it's generally less than 90 seconds. So if you did a set of 10 repetitions at 6 seconds each, which is what we use in our system here, so it'd be 60 seconds, and it's under that 90-second range. You can actually go up to 15 repetitions and still be on the 90-second range. There's no problem with doing that if you want to be a little more conservative. So you could go between 10 and 15, but you want to fatigue the muscles within the energy system that is related to strength development. When you get to 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes, now it becomes more muscular endurance, but doesn't have quite the same strength building or muscle building stimulus. And then, of course, when you get to 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, it becomes an aerobic activity. Even 5 minutes becomes an aerobic activity with more cardiovascular benefit than musculoskeletal benefit.
Right. And when you're talking about fatigue, that's a big difference than going to failure, right? So fatigue is when you, if I understand this correctly, is when you start to have difficulty performing a rep properly. And failure is when you can't complete the repetition. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. A new research study was just published, and it had one group that went to failure, meaning that they would go until they could not lift another repetition. They'd get halfway through, say, repetition number 12, and they couldn't do it with good form, so it would just stop. We'd call that failure, as you just said so succinctly. The other group did failure -1. In other words, they were trained to after a period of time, they would know when they could do one more rep. They had enough strength to do one more rep, and when they got to the point and said, I can get one more, but not two more, they would stop one short. And both groups made statistically the same improvement in strength. So you don't have to go to absolute failure, but you need to be fairly close to fatiguing the muscle to get the optimal stimulus for growth and development.
Right, and that's a really important point for people to understand, is that you get that benefit without the potential of injuring your muscles. Because in the old days, it said no pain, no gain. So you were taught to go to failure, and that's when you have the most chance of injury.
Absolutely correct.
Let's talk a little bit about your research. So, recent study that I read that the average American life expectancy is actually going in reverse, and people are dying at an earlier age than the national average used to be. And a lot of it is attributed to poverty and social issues, but I think a big factor has got to be sedentary lifestyle, and you've looked at a lot of that and in your research on obesity and type 2 diabetes and how strength training can actually reverse that. I think the CDC estimates something like 40% of American adults and almost 19% of children and adolescents are obese. But your research has shown that particularly strength training can reverse some of this. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yes, you have some great figures there, Rashid. Thank you. I'm going to give you some other figures.
Yeah.
And this is based on body mass index, which is it underestimates. It's not really very accurate because as we age, we lose muscle at a very rapid rate. We lose about 5 pounds of muscle per decade on average during the midlife years. And after age 50, especially for women in the menopause period, that jumps up to about 10 pounds of muscle loss per decade, or 1 pound per year. But with those numbers, just based on body mass index, which again is an underestimate, about 70% of Americans are overweight or obese, which is very interesting because data from the Journal of the American Medical Association shows us that about 70% of Americans are presently following a low-calorie diet. So dieting does not work in terms of permanent weight loss. On the other side of the coin, unfortunately, and I am very sad to share this with you, when the CDC looks at 10,000 individuals who they monitor their actual exercise with accelerometers, which would be like a pedometer, except a little more specialized, they find that fewer than 5% of Americans of all ages, adult ages, and social strata are not getting enough exercise to meet the minimal recommendations from the American Heart Association, the American College of Sports Medicine. That minimum recommendation is 30 minutes a day of the equivalent of walking at about 2.5 miles per hour, which is not a fast pace. And that could be mowing your lawn or raking leaves, or if you're a post office or postman or postwoman, anything that you do, and it could be accumulated over the course of the day for 30 minutes of pretty moderate activity, and 95% of Americans are not hitting that.
Wow!
So we're in big trouble.
Yeah,
we're in big trouble now. When
95%, it's 95% of
specific
people are not getting enough exercise. I mean,
specifically according to the data. Now you see other data where people are called up on the phone and asked to recall what they did, and that usually overestimates what they're doing. When you actually put accelerometers on, you have 3.5% of Americans under age 50 and less than 2.5% of Americans over age 50 So we have a lot of work to do. We haven't done a great job in my profession. We need to do better. But of that number, most of those people are doing walking. And so very few people are doing resistance exercise to change the course of events that reduces muscle at the rate of about, I'm going to put in percentage now, about 10% per decade as we get to the older adult ages, and reduces bone by up to 30% per decade as we get over age 50. So one of the reasons we have a shorter lifespan is because our musculoskeletal system is failing us. And when our musculoskeletal system is deficient, we can't really do much aerobic activity or other functional, activities. We lose a lot of ability to do the things that help us maintain health, let alone fitness. So there's a lot to be said for aerobic activity, and we do that as well, and we include it in all of our studies, but we specialize in the resistance exercise because we feel that the musculoskeletal system, again, is like the engine and chassis of the vehicles that we drive called our bodies.
Right, well, that's a good way to put it. I think that, well, one of the things that I found really fascinating about your research is that all of this is reversible. So your muscle and bone density can be improved with strength exercise, and which is a bit different than just cardio, right? As you explain, and that,
yes,
and that all of that is. It's I could say it's an optimistic message to people that even though you might have fallen out of shape, that you can reverse that and get back into shape, because the body is an amazing, resilient organism, yes. And you just have to understand how it works. I mean, evolution has given us a body that needs exercise, and our lifestyle has made it in such a way that it neglects our genetic evolution. So your research is proving that to be true, I think.
There are several components to our research. I don't want to jump ahead here, but I'll just share a little bit. If in fact, and I'm going to suggest that about 85% of American adults have too much fat, and I'm going to also suggest that the reason they have too much fat is because they have too little muscle. So when you lose muscle at the rate of 8 to 10% per decade, your resting metabolic rate, the energy, the calories we burn at rest, decreases about 2 to 4% per decade. And so even if we're eating the same, we're losing muscle, plasma slowing down, and we're gaining fat. Also, when you lose muscle, you lose bone. They go hand in hand. So people go on a diet to lose the weight. And when they go on the diet, if it's a good diet, and they say they lose 20 pounds, 1/4 of that weight is going to be muscle. Because when you reduce the calories and don't do proper exercise, your body says, I've got to take those calories from someplace, and it will take about 3/4 of it from fat. But unfortunately, it takes about 1/4 from muscle. So they've lost 15 pounds of fat, but 5 pounds of muscle. Metabolism slows down even further. When they go back to normal eating, 95% of all successful dieters regain the weight they've lost within a relatively short period of time. So it exacerbates the problem.
That's
worse.
Really interesting, yeah.
When you do dieting and aerobic exercise, because you're dieting and now you're bringing the candle at both ends, you do lose more fat, but you also lose more muscle. You lose about 20% more muscle, which is not good, or 25% more muscle, which is not good at all. So that exacerbates the problem further. Now, when we do our studies, we cut calories to a moderate amount, not a lot. Women about 1,500 calories a day, men about 1,800, so it's doable. It's not extremely severe or restrictive. They have enough energy to do some exercise. We do about 20 minutes of resistance exercise and 20 minutes of aerobic exercise. So we think they're both important. 2 or 3 days a week. So it's not overbearing, 40 minutes twice a week. Most people can fit that into their schedules. But you say, well, how come you get results? Because we add extra protein. I'm not a nutritionist, but our studies based on the work that has been done by some great physicians and nutritionists that run the Harvard Medical School International Conference on Obesity every year, we follow their guidelines for extra protein, more protein in the diet. And when you have extra protein as the substance to build muscle, and you have strength training as the stimulus to build muscle. In our 6-month studies, we see approximately a 14-pound fat loss, but unlike most other studies, no muscle loss. In fact, not even maintenance of muscle. We have approximately a 4-pound muscle gain. So you say, well, that means they only lost 10 pounds on the scale. Yes, that's right. They lost 14 pounds of fat, added 4 pounds of muscle. That shows up as a 10-pound weight change in the right direction. But in fact, they've changed their body composition, which is really important, far more important than the weight on the scale, by 18 pounds, or roughly 3 pounds per month, which is doable. And when we follow up with a 6-month study after that 6-month weight loss period, we find that they don't regain the weight like 95% of all weight loss dieters. And in fact, they continue to add muscle, another 3 pounds during that 3 months, and they continue to lose fat. Not a lot, but a little, and they're back at normal eating. However, we're still maintaining the high protein intake and the 2 weekly workouts, which should be a lifestyle. Keep in mind also that people over 50 need significantly more protein than people under 50 because we don't process it as well.
But your research has found that when you add extra protein, it helps with that.
It's essential. And we follow Dr. Caroline Apovian's guidelines. She's the co-director of the, as I say, the International Conference on Obesity at Harvard Medical School every year, and a best-selling author as well, a physician who is outstanding in nutrition. She recommends 0.7 grams of protein per pound of body weight, your ideal body weight. So if I weighed 200, but my ideal body weight was 150, I would base that on 150, and I'd take 105 grams of protein per day. And that's what we've used in a series, several 5 successive studies on this particular topic, and had awesome results in all of them, and no problems, no issues, no injuries, no illnesses, or anything of that nature. So I am not able to recommend that, but she does, and that's what we follow.
Interesting. I think of all of the research that I have read that you've done, I think that piece right there about dieting is the most enlightening to me, because most people, including myself, are not aware that just dieting doesn't do anything. Well, actually, it's doing more harm than good, as you explained. And so but that's is kind of a nature's way of survival, right? So when you're doing a severe diet, your body is thinking that it's starving, and so it's gonna cut muscle because you're not using it. So if I'm starving and I'm not exercising, and my body's thinking, oh, I've got to survive here, it's going to start eating into the muscle, or using the muscle for burning calories as well as the fat.
Yeah.
And then, as you said,
Absolutely correct.
Your muscle tissue burns more calories at a resting rate, right? So then that means that when you're losing 25%, as you said, of your muscle mass, while you're losing 75% of fat, your metabolic rate has just decreased further than when you started the exercise. So now you can't maintain that diet because it's not sustainable, right? It's
exactly
too hard.
Exactly right. So when you lose 20 pounds, and you lose 5 pounds of muscle and 15 pounds of fat, as you said perfectly, your resting metabolic rate declines significantly. And so when you go back to normal eating, what used to be the right number of calories to maintain your weight is now far too many because your metabolism has slowed down, and you will gain the weight back. It's not a matter of willpower, it's a matter of just survival physiology. But when you regain the weight, you regain more fat than you lost, and you regain less lean weight or muscle than you lost. And so you say, well, I'll do this again. I've got to do it again. And each time you do it, you end up losing more and more lean mass. Another thing that's very interesting, I'm not talking about your total metabolism, but just the metabolism of your muscle itself. If you look at a pound of muscle in an untrained person, someone who doesn't do strength training, they can be walking or doing other activities, but they're not strength training. Every pound of skeletal muscle would burn at rest, if you were in bed all day, it would burn about 6 calories per pound just to maintain it, to keep it alive. All right. But if you strength train twice a week or more, you have this breakdown and repair process that uses 50% more protein. So a pound of strength trained muscle, someone does regular strength train 2 or 3 or more times a week, their muscle per pound burns 9 calories a day at rest. That's a 50% greater increase. So the best thing you can do for metabolism is resistance exercise, because it not only gives you more muscle, which requires more calories, and reverses the loss of muscle and bone, which we can get to later during the aging process, but it also increases your resting metabolic rate, which for most of us, most sedentary people, most people who work in offices like I do, that's about 65 to 70% of the calories you burn per day is at rest. And so that muscle's burning it all day and all night, and it's not really meant to be a secret, but so few people understand this.
Right. And most people think that, well, when I exercise, I'm burning the calories, but then actually that's not the major benefit of exercise. It's how it changes your resting metabolic rate and the impact on burning calories at that state, because that's the majority of your day is when you're at rest, right?
If I can give you just some simple math on that, if you were to do a circuit of strength training like we do, say one set of 12 exercises, you're burning about 8 calories per minute. So let's say it took you 20 minutes to do that. You're not resting too much. You're going right from station to station. You burn about 160 calories. And you say, well, I'm doing that 3 times a week. So that'd be, about 500 calories a week, and say, okay, over the course of a month, that's 2,000 calories. That's pretty good, but it's not that much. It's not even a pound of fat. We normally consider a pound of fat about 3,500 calories. But if you raise your resting metabolic rate, and I'm going to give you the low end here, 100 calories per day, and it can go much higher than that when you strength train. The research shows anywhere between 100 and 150 calories per day increase in resting metabolic rate for 3 full days after a workout. So let's take this, the lowest one, 100 calories per day increase in resting metabolism, 30 days in a month. You've burned 3,000 calories just by staying alive. So you've burned 50% more calories at rest than you did during exercise, which I'm not saying you shouldn't, spend more time in exercise or go for walks, do aerobic activity, but, for busy people, boy, that's good. So you've really used, a pound and a half of fat just through your strength training on that month, most of which came from the resting between workouts. So it really has a lot of benefits that people are not fully cognizant of.
Right, and that's probably a big factor in how people are able to keep weight off with the program of strength training, because it's the muscle. It's not just the calories being burnt when you're doing the exercise. It's the alteration of your metabolic rate that's key to this. And I think that's the thing.
That is our philosophy, yes.
That's what I learned from your research.
Well, the research supports it, but I don't hear too many people saying that, but we truly believe it. I will say one more thing, because if we had cut the calories more in our nutrition program and eliminated the aerobic activity, we would have lost more fat and gained more muscle. But I know you know this about me. I believe that aerobic activity is just as important as resistance training, and so we always include aerobic activity, even though we don't get quite as good results in terms of the fat loss and muscle gain. It attenuates that a little bit with the aerobic in the mix. We feel that the cardiovascular benefits far outweigh the couple extra pounds of fat loss and the pound extra muscle gain. If you make this a lifestyle, you'll get there soon enough, and you'll get there with a good cardiovascular system as well as a good musculoskeletal system.
Right, and it doesn't. I mean, you need to be persistent with this. You can't just see the changes overnight, right? But I think a lot of people say that within 3 months, you will, with a consistent exercise training program, you'll start to see significant changes in your body composition. What has your research shown? That period of time, or less or more?
Yes. Our research shows that the majority of our research was done with 10-week protocols. We have, again, almost 3,000 people altogether in some of those studies. But we typically see, if you train without dieting now, if you strength train 2 or 3 days a week, and there's no difference between the two for beginners in our studies, you add about 3 pounds, 3.1 to be precise, of lean weight, most of which would be muscle. Some would be bone, maybe a little blood volume, but most of that is muscle. In 10 weeks. We see that with all age ranges, not with both genders. Men add more and women add less, but on average, it's about 3 pounds of new muscle. And at the same time, without dieting, without changing your nutrition pattern, they lose about 4 pounds of fat. And we see that consistently in study after study after study, year after year after year. So their weight didn't change very much, only by 1 pound. They lost 1 pound, but they changed their body composition by 7 pounds, 3 pounds more muscle, 4 pounds less fat. Now, we found that continues at about that rate for the first 6 months of training in terms of the muscle gain and the fat loss. And then it starts to plateau a little bit, so you need to change some things around and maybe train a little more vigorously. But that continues for some time. And I didn't mention this, but during that time, and this is at a much slower pace than the muscle regain, but when we started doing these studies, the orthopedist said you can't build bone, you lose it, it's gone. But numerous studies now have shown, ours being one of them, that you can add bone at the rate of about 1% of your bone mineral density per year. Now, we did a 9-month study. We had the extra protein, which most studies haven't used. We also had calcium and vitamin D, which most studies do use. With the extra protein, we got a 1% increase in bone in just 9 months. That's a lot better than the control groups that in most of the studies lose about 1 to 2, even 3% of their bone, depending on the age of the people. And these are mostly done with postmenopausal women on a yearly basis. So what I'm saying for muscle gain, metabolic increase, and fat loss also applies directly to bone gain.
And that's really important because as we get older, your bones start to become your bones become more brittle just through the natural aging process. But that actually can be stopped and reversed, which is really, really amazing.
We're not the key researchers in that area. Miriam Nelson and many others have done outstanding studies. But I do want to say one thing that you mentioned in your introduction, and that is you have to be somewhat specific with the strength. You can't just say, well, I do a lot of things. My wife was the director of a large YMCA fitness center for many years, and she did her strength training. Not a lot, but she did the minimal amount that we recommend, and she did it regularly. When she left, she retired from that, and she has a horse, and so she does a lot of chores. You know, she's scooping poop and carrying grain and hay, and you think, she said, well, I don't need to do my strength training where I'm doing all these activities. She had never had osteoporosis or osteopenia, but come to find out after just a couple of years of not doing her strength training, because she's a small-framed woman, she's about 5'1" and about 95 pounds, she ended up with the bone loss, significant bone loss. So we said, we got to get you back to doing the strength training. There's something about that progressive resistance, and what you said in the very beginning, the systematic application to a training program that is very, very important. So she's doing better now. She's back on the weights.
And that's a big difference that people don't understand between strength training and cardiovascular, like running. That's not gonna do it for you in reversing bone loss. You have to have.
I hate to say this because I'm a runner and a walker, and I love this, and it has a lot of benefits, but it was greatly overrated in the past for its bone building benefits. You really need more of a resistance type training, anaerobic, force absorption, force production type of an exercise to really stress the bone in a productive manner so that it will increase in its mineral density, bone mineral density.
And I guess that makes a lot of sense in the sense that there was a lot of focus on cardiovascular because of all the research on heart disease, or the concern about heart disease. So the focus was on cardiovascular strengthening or exercise and the benefits for the vascular system. But your research consistently over the years has been on strength training, and not too many people have focused on that. And now today it's becoming known the importance of strength training. And if you look at
The
the human body, right, the physiology, it makes a lot of sense because we're not one thing or the other. We're an organism that does all of that. And so I think if you just do strength training or if you just do cardio, that's not really a correct understanding of the human body. It's a system, and you've got to approach it in that fashion. You've got to
if
do everything, right? You got to do your stretching,
yes,
you've got to do your weightlifting,
yes,
you got to do your cardio all together in a training program that
I'm not.
that
I'm
does it,
sorry.
right.
I'm sorry. I was going to say that you're probably not old enough to remember this, Rashid, but we owe a tremendous debt to Kenneth Cooper, who was a great cardiologist and also an Air Force major. And he wrote the book back in 1968 called Aerobics, and he started the aerobic movement. He's a great man. He's done so much for fitness and the cardiovascular aspects. But he's a friend, and when the Air Force, again, I know you work with the Coast Guard, but the Air Force was having so much difficulty with their service people passing their fitness tests. They, they were using cardio only as a means of getting them back in shape, and it just wasn't working. And Ken Cooper was asked, what can we do? And he was kind of saying, I want to bring in Wayne, and we're going to do a circuit training protocol, a system where it includes both strength and endurance. Obviously, we want the endurance in there, but we did with the Air Force at Langley Air Force Base a wonderful study, which they did 1 minute of strength training, like an exercise like say leg extension, and then 1 minute on a bike. Just to do a little brief cardio, and then 1 minute on maybe a chest press, and then 1 minute on a bike. We did 10 strength exercises and 10 cycles. So it took 20 minutes, 3 days a week, and they absolutely blew the top off of the fitness test, including the waist girth measurement, which was 50% of the test score, including the 1.5 mile run, which was 30% of the test score. They did fabulous on, even though they did no running during the program. And of course, they just crushed the push-up and the sit-up test. So you can certainly combine both of these, as we did with the Air Force study, in a brief period of time, and have tremendous benefits of, as you said, both the cardiovascular system and the musculoskeletal. So I just want to give that as another systematic example of a very brief but very beneficial protocol that we've used in many other instances, as well as the Air Force.
Very interesting. Was that program something like CrossFit that you see today in gyms, or how's that different?
It was at a little lower level. As we were working with people that in the Air Force and people in society in general they'd gained too much weight. They're sitting in front of computers and radar screens and things like that, and they just weren't getting enough activity, and they were overweight and underfit. And the Air Force said, well, we're going to give you heart rate monitors and pedometers. We're going to have you do an hour of running or fast walking 4 or 5 days a week. But that was just not the right mix for them. They weren't in shape to even do that. So when we got the 20 minutes of a fairly simple, remember I said that with strength training you can bring that weight down to anything that you need to be successful, to get 10 or 15 repetitions, and 1 minute on a bike at any pace you choose. Most people can do that much. So we brought it down to a level where people could succeed, and then we would progress gradually and systematically as we went through the program. So it wasn't at the level of CrossFit. CrossFit's wonderful, but it's probably, everybody says, well, this is for people of all ages and all conditions, but nothing really fits that. You have to adjust it. I would suggest, I love CrossFit, but I suggest that it's a little more advanced than what we did with our beginners and our weight loss participants and our older adults.
Yeah, and CrossFit is probably something that you need to work into. It's a pretty vigorous
right
program.
Highly respected, but we don't put our beginners into CrossFit.
No, I'm not in that either. I need to work myself up to it. Wayne, so we had talked a little bit the other day about the difference between free weights and machines like Nautilus. And I know in your research, you use both, and in your book, Strength Training Past 50, you give examples of all types of equipment, including resistance bands and exercise balls and so forth. What Some people swear by one or the other, and you told me some interesting things about your work with some sports teams. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between these, and is one better than the other, and how has that impacted your,
Sure.
I should say, impacted your understanding of exercise programs?
I'd be pleased to do that. And that is a good question. Many people have confusion on that point. So basically, if I were to do a preacher bench curl, I think you know that I've got my elbows on the bench and I have the bar in my hand. Do a preacher bench curl with a barbell, or if I was to do a preacher bench curl with a weight stack machine, it would be exactly the same. The muscles would not know the difference. It's the same stimulus essentially and the same response. However, if I stood up and held a barbell and I did a standing barbell curl, that would be much different than either of the, either the preacher curl with a barbell or the preacher curl with a machine, because now when I'm standing up, and many free weight exercises require you standing, I need to involve some stabilizer muscles. I need to contract my core muscles, especially my lower back, or I would go down to the bar instead of the bar coming up to me. I need to contract my pectoralis major, my latissimus dorsi muscle, to keep my elbows against my side so I can do proper form and really I emphasize the target muscle groups, the biceps. So when you do many free weight exercises, you involve a lot more muscles, stabilizer muscles, perhaps, or even assisting muscles. So I like to do bench presses, and I like to do barbell bench presses. That's just something I really like because I've done this since I was a boy. But with a barbell bench press, I have to control. I can't go this way too far. I can't go that way too far. I don't want to ratchet and go up unevenly. I've got to control that with a lot of assisting muscles. If I do a machine bench press, I probably would get a better workout because I have a supportive structure behind me. I have a fixed movement pattern. I don't have to worry about one arm or the other or going too far one direction or the other. I just think about pushing as hard as I can. So psychologically, you have to decide, what do I want to do? What feels best for me? And physiologically, when you are talking about older individuals, unfit individuals, overweight individuals, obese individuals, maybe starting with machines, we have a supportive structure and a fixed movement pattern. Maybe that's a good idea as your foundational training. And then you can advance up or progress upward to using free weights if you choose to do so. And then as we discussed the other day, then you can even go to functional training where you say, well, I really want to do something that's more functional. And for my sports or my activities of daily living or for my hobbies, whatever that might be, and that is fine. What we also discussed was I had the privilege, probably back about 15 years ago or so, working with 6 of the NFL football teams. I did not work with the players, but I worked with the strength coaches, and I was a consultant and a resource for them and a researcher. And the teams that I worked with won a lot of Super Bowls. The Steelers, for example, during that era, and the Redskins won a lot of Super Bowls, and they were machine training teams, and they were pretty much high intensity teams. They didn't spend a lot of time in the gym. Now I live in the Boston area, so I'm a New England fan, and they train differently, and they won even more Super Bowls. So it really depends on the physiological, goals that you have and the psychological, feelings that you have towards exercise. But you can certainly get strong on free weights, machines, and we've done research with bands as well, and they work just fine as long as you work them properly. So the muscles, as long as you do what I said earlier, fatigue the target muscles within the anaerobic energy system, typically, around 60 to 90 seconds, you'll do just fine.
Right. And that's really interesting. So I think that gives a good perspective for people. So it's not so much, in my opinion, it's not so much what you're doing, it's the fact that you're doing something, and you're doing it in a training methodology as opposed to just randomly doing it. So when you go get on a machine, you're doing the same training as if you were doing it with a free weight, and you are using the progressive training method.
And,
so it's the same thing. It's just a different tool.
Rashid, what you've said at least 10 times, and I've said it almost that many times, it has to be systematic. And I just want to define that to my understanding with a system. is you keep records of every workout. I've done this for 60, well, not 60, 55 years, all right? And I still keep records of every workout, so I know what did I do, how can I progress gradually, systematically, without doing too much too soon to injure myself, but still making progress. Keeping records of what you do, whether it's machines or free weights or bands, and then using a gradual, systematic progression is the best advice that I can give, and you already gave it. So I just want to echo that and say thank you for saying that. We don't normally have people say that in the interviews, and I usually forget to say it. So thank you so much. That's the real key to enjoying the process and also making progress.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I keep records myself, and it's kind of fun because I go back, decades as well, and look at what I was doing, and it's like, oh yeah, I should focus more on that exercise. And I remember enjoying a particular exercise as well, and you also, I found really useful is writing some notes along with your exercise. So you can't remember everything, and then in 10 years you might go back like I have and look at something and remember. It jogs your memory to help improve your training. So that's it's a really good advice. Thank you, Wayne, for elaborating on that.
Thanks for letting me.
Another question that I had around the weights and the exercises, and we were one thing I wanted, before I get into that, I wanted to ask you, could you elaborate a little bit about what is a functional exercise versus other types of exercise?
Yes. Let me give you an example. One of the top people in our field is expert on functional exercise, and he's kind of the leader in this area, and he has been for years, and I really respect him. And he would perhaps say that, instead of lying on a bench or sitting on a Knowles machine and doing a chest press, that you'd get more benefit if you stood in front of two cables. You have a cable in each hand, and they're attached to weights on a weight stack, and I push the cables forward, which, of course, Newton says there's an equal and opposite reaction that would tend to push me back. But because I'm standing, I have to engage my core. So I'd engage especially my abdominal muscles, but all my core muscles to maintain that standing posture. And so it would be more functional. It'd be more like, playing football, pushing an opposing player, or whatever else you might do, even to the passion, just opening a door that's kind of a hard door to open, like some of the big doors, something like that. That would be what we'd call more functional. And that is fine. That you just have to know what your goal is. My goal is to develop, my chest and also these core functional stabilizer muscles, so I can do this when I'm standing and push someone or push something. Mm-hmm. But when he did his thesis, one of his graduate degree thesis, he looked at that and he said, yeah, that works just like I thought it would. But he said, I can only use about half as much weight doing that. And the subject's only use about half as much weight doing it that way as you could when you have that support behind you to push against, because the weak link now becomes your abdominal muscles. Mm-hmm. And you say, well, I'm not doing the chest press for my abdominal muscles. I'm doing it for my chest muscle in your front shoulders and your triceps. So it depends on what your goal is. If you really want to build your chest muscles, probably it'd be better to do a machine or a bench press, so you have that stability and support, so you can use more weight. But if you say, no, for what I want to do, what I'm trying to do here, I want to do it from a standing position so I can really stabilize and maintain my balance and do the things I need to do for my sport or activity, then you might want to do what we refer to as functional training. And again, it just depends on your goal. I'm not saying one is bad and one is good. You just have to understand what's happening when I change things around this manner. So what we do, we have that pyramid where we start with the foundational, usually machines, then we go to the fundamental free weight exercises, and then the peak of the pyramid would be adding in, not neglecting your basic exercise, but adding in the functional training that would have specific purposes for sport or recreation or work or things of that nature.
Interesting. And I going back to what you had mentioned about what your objectives are, I think that's really a key thing when you start out in training, is understanding what do you want to achieve. So if you're a bodybuilder, that's quite different than if you're playing golf.
Right.
So, but a lot of people don't even know why they just hear that, oh, I need to exercise because of all the health reasons, but they don't understand that they need to have a vision and an objective, and then understand there's differences in your training to what you want to achieve.
You mentioned the golf. We did studies on golf. I've even written a book on golf. I was the co-author. I've never played golf a day in my life, so don't buy the book because of me, but because the co-author was the physical therapist for Greg Norman and the personal trainer for Greg Norman. He's great, but we did a lot of research with golfers. I did it because I felt that golfers were in terrible shape. They spent all their time practicing golf or playing golf or riding in cars, and I wanted to get in shape, and they did. After the 10 weeks, they had added about 4 pounds of muscle, lost about 4 pounds of fat, made significant reductions in their blood pressure, and we've also seen reductions in blood sugar and things of that nature in our studies. But they loved it because they increased their clubhead speed significantly and could drive the ball farther. So, their objective was simply, I want to drive the ball farther, anything to get a longer shot off the tee. But our goal was, in the process, did you notice that number one, you gained muscle, lost fat, but number two, these were all people who had been injured playing golf, which has a very high injury rate, surprisingly, and they played the next season without a single injury, and they played a lot more golf. So again, it depends on your goals, but there can be sometimes some what do we call it? There's a word for that. Surreptitiously, they gained a lot more than they thought.
That's an interesting point, because a lot of people think that, well, I'm going to train for golf. I'm just going to do exercises that will, like upper body, that will help me with the swing. But actually, it's the proper training, as you're suggesting, it's really your entire body is just, you're going to do it in a certain way. Your
beautiful comment.
Your hips and everything, right? So it's...
Yes. In fact, Rashid, all the power for that swing, just like in hitting a baseball or a tennis ball or throwing a football, whatever, all the power comes from the legs. Those are your huge muscles. So you definitely need the legs to give the power. Then that power is transferred through the core musculature, the oblique muscles, the lower back, the abdominals. It transfers to your upper body. And then, of course, the actual swing muscles would be your chest and shoulders and upper back. And then the control muscles to control the club and what goes with that would be your arm muscles. So you're right, it's the entire body. And the most important thing for a golfer are the neck muscles, because if you move your head and you lose your focus on the ball, you're not going to hit it square. You're going to hit it far, but it's going to go into the woods. So I sound like I'm a golfer. I've never played this sport, but I've talked to a lot of golfers, and they say, boy, everything helps. I'm hitting the ball better. I'm hitting it, driving right through the center of the ball. It's going right where I want. So all those muscle groups, and especially the lower back, where golfers have so many issues, very, very important.
Right, and that's how training makes a big difference, as opposed to just randomly guessing at what you're doing. So do you recommend for people that are listening that are into sports like that, a personal trainer, or are there what?
Yes,
I guess depending on how serious you want to get, but I think personal trainers a good personal trainer is always useful. What would you recommend looking for in a personal trainer?
There are many good books. There are many good videos. But I took up skiing later in life, and I was about 50 when I took up skiing. And I went to the biggest mountain here in the East. Don't ask me why, but we had a staff retreat there, and everybody else knew how to ski except me. So I said, I'm gonna learn how to do it. I'm fairly athletic. I think I can do it. But believe me, I didn't go up to the mountain with any of them. I hired a ski instructor, and I got the best one on the mountain. And I said, I need help. I've never done this before, and I'm an old timer. And, I progressed so quickly that I didn't need a lot of lessons because I had really good instruction. And it makes all the difference in the world. So sometimes, if I've never done this before, get a good nationally certified personal trainer, and you don't have to spend the rest of your life with that person, but at least get the basics down properly and learn what you need to know. Because most of us, when we start a new sport or activity, we don't even know what we need to know. So you want to go with someone who can really help you and guide you and give you feedback. The books are good. I mean, I like reading books, I like videos, but they don't give you feedback. They're not talking with you, but you have a personal trainer. They can tell you, okay, you're doing fine, but you need to change this a little bit or that a little bit. We need to slow down your progression or increase your progression, all those things. I certainly recommend personal trainers, or at least facilities that have good instructors available if you can't afford a personal trainer.
Right. I totally agree. And that's why I asked that question. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Just wanted to say from my own personal experience on training was that when I started back into strength training after some years off, I got a personal trainer, and it made a world of difference. So I had been, as a youth, kind of, when I started out, it was maybe a few years later than you. I'm not that much younger. I'm 67 now. But
Wow.
when I
You look great.
oh, thank you. I thought you were younger than me. So when I started exercise was when I was a teenager, and strength training was not something that anybody really did. But because I was, I guess you could say, skinny and thin and had a real hard time gaining muscle, I think my doctor recommended, lifting weights, and so I got I think it was a set of Sears
Yes.
barbells, and
Yes.
years later I was always wondering what's inside these things, and the plastic covering broke off, and it was concrete. It was a block of concrete that I was
Yes.
lifting all those years.
I know. I'm familiar with those. Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, my guidebook was like Joe Weider's book,
Sure.
and so it was. I don't know if I can say it was training because I didn't understand progressive training and all of that, and my budget was limited, so I just stuck with what I had. But I did gain muscle, and I played sports, and so I was in pretty good shape. And then I had my own business in my 30s, and just totally got out of shape. And then when I was 39, I treated myself to a Gold's Gym membership with the intention of getting back into shape by the time I was 40. So that was for a present for my 40th birthday. And I got a personal trainer. And from that, I learned basically what progressive training was, and how you have to record things, and how your nutrition, and I went from a 20s. They did with a caliper. They calculated I had 26% body fat, and so I was told that I was a skinny fat person. And so I weighed 150 pounds and 26% body fat. So that's out of shape. And and 3 months later, I was 180 pounds with a 15% body fat. So
wow,
and
that is fabulous.
But I trained like crazy. It was 4 or 5 days a week, pretty intense, 3 hours a day. And I just totally immersed myself into it. But I had never
Congratulations.
I had never realized, my potential, and I still probably hadn't reached it, but I was in pretty good shape, and I knew that when I was able to keep up with aerobic instructors and other people that were in pretty good shape. So I always felt myself kind of like the last guy in the race, if you will, and so it was something that I was tapping into my genetic potential that I never realized, and that's something that I want to let people know, that you can achieve much, much more than you ever thought you could, but you just have to do it correctly. And that's why I like your work, because it is so informative, and it's based on science. So there's
yes, that is true.
That of
just
how you can do this.
Your listeners and viewers know 15% body fat is what the fitness profession considers to be ideal for men. Women, somewhere between 20 and 25%. But you were right there at 180, 15% body fat. You were rock solid. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. That was. I'm not going to say it's luck. It's just that's what my training gave me, and I think it's a lot of hard work. So anybody that's doing this training can't think that it's going to be easy. And that's why people think that diets are going to work
Right.
for them, because it's an easy thing. You just stop eating.
Right.
You don't have to do anything else. But that's
Right.
not how your body works. And if you're not going to do it, then, well, that's not going to happen. So you've got to exercise like you do. You put that work in, but how do you feel, Wayne? I mean, do you feel like you're 70 in your 70s?
Thank God I don't. I when I look at my times on the track, I realize I'm 70. And when I look at the weights I lift compared to what I used to lift, I realize I'm 70. But I certainly don't feel any different than I've ever felt, quite honestly. And I'm so thankful for that, because I feel healthy and fit. Anything can happen, but I really appreciate the fact that I can function well and I feel well. I may look 70, but inside I don't identify with being that. Oh, I keep asking, how did I get this old? What happened? But and other people are they're slowing down at a much faster rate. I'll say that than if you do your exercise. So I'm blessed in many ways, but I do have always enjoyed, as you, doing both types of exercise, strength and endurance exercise, and that has certainly been a benefit.
For our listeners, I think that is really encouraging, because don't think about what you used to be able to do. Think about what you can do now. And
Right.
for myself, it's the same. I can't run as fast. I can't lift the same weights, but I'm not worried about that. I'm more concentrated on how I feel, my energy level, and whether I can bend down and tie my shoes and stand on one foot, or things that people our age are having difficulty doing. And what your research shows is that you can stop that process and reverse that process and get back into a shape that is a healthy one. So
Yes, I agree 100%.
Can you in parting, just summarizing everything, or can you give our listeners some final advice on beginning a strength training program?
Yes. Begin at a relatively low level so that you are constantly reinforced by making progress. Don't do too much too soon. We start all of our people with, as I said, about 10 exercises that work the major muscle groups. We do one set each, and we can progress to more sets. We go to, as you said, fatigue, not to failure. We can do that later on. We can do high intensity training, but after they've conditioned themselves to prepare for that, and if they really want to do that. Also, to include some aerobic, and you mentioned this, I didn't, but flexibility exercise, stretching. When you combine strength training and stretching, we get 19% greater strength gains than when we do strength training alone. They're two sides of the same coin. The ability of a muscle to contract and shorten it, and the ability of muscle to relax and lengthen. They go together. And I think cardio and strength go together. So try and get a good systematic program. And then if you are in our age range, if you're over 50, be sure you're getting a little more water than you used to, because we need it, and we need more protein. The best researcher in this area with the protein has found that if you're over 50 and you're strength training even 3 hours a day like you were doing in your late 30s, if you're over 50 and you just the RDA, the recommended daily allowance of protein, you're still not going to gain muscle. In fact, you have to eat 25% more than the RDA to maintain your muscle. And Dr. Campbell has stated clearly from his research that you need about 50% more protein than the RDA, the recommended daily allowance, to build muscle if you're over 50. Now, the recommended daily allowance is about 0.4 grams per pound of body weight. So 50% more than that would be 0.6 grams per pound of body weight. And we use 0.7, but 0.6 or 0.7 is just fine. But make sure you get enough building material to make the stimulus of strength training productive in terms of building more muscle, building more bone, and increasing your strength. So sensible eating, sensible aerobics, sensible flexibility exercise, flexible strength training, and put it all together and keep good records. And it sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. You don't have to spend all day in the gym to gain these benefits, as I shared with our circuit training protocols and our weight loss protocols. They can fit into a normal lifestyle, and you'll still see not as good as your results, but you'll still see excellent results.
And you're right. You have to make it your lifestyle, right? It has to become part of your daily routine.
Tell your boss you need Wednesday mornings off to do your work. But that's the only way I can do it. As you know, like you, I'm extremely busy like everybody, and so I actually do that. I instead of taking a week at a time or a couple weeks, I just say, just give me every Wednesday, and I can take other days occasionally, but Wednesdays and Saturdays are my big strength training days, and I feel it's that important, and my bosses agree with me, so that's good news.
That's wonderful, and I think a lot of people can find a way to make that work. You just have to think about it and commit to it. So
yes,
that's
I'm being facetious about telling people to take day off. I do that because I have to, but well, as you said, you can find a way to make that happen. Yes.
Wayne, thank you so much for your time and all of your encouragement in the program and sharing all of your research with me. It's been really, really informative and enjoyable.
Well,
and thank you again.
Thank you for taking my research and writing it up much better than I ever have and sharing it with so many people. Really appreciate you.
Thanks, Wayne. Really appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye now.